public and in private, Donald Trump is reportedly shaken by the prospect of an economic downturn, having pinned all of his hopes for re-election on the strength of the economy. He also woke up to ominous poll numbers from his most favorite network, Fox News, that show him losing to all of the top Democratic candidates for president in 2020. Here are those numbers. Biden beats Donald Trump 50-38. Bernie Sanders 48-39, Elizabeth Warren 46-39, and Senator Kamala Harris 45-39. And on that topic of the president's political vulnerability, the Washington Post reports, quote, mounting signs of global economic distress this week have alarmed President Trump, who's worried that a downturn could imperil his reelection, even as administration officials acknowledge that they have not planned for a possible recession. The New York Times adds this, quote, in private, he's expressed his own anxiety about the economy taking a dive, knowing that his electoral fortunes are likely tied to it, even as he vents frustration that his opponents are overstating the troubles. As the president's anxiety meter surges, his rally performance, another point of pride for the reality television president, has also taken a hit. The New York Times describes last night's rally like this, quote, his speech was at times a greatest hits album of favorite lines, replaying the 2016 campaign against Hillary Clinton. We should note she's not running this time, and bashing the news media, Democrats, and America's allies in Europe. Typically rambling, veering on and off script, seemingly at random, over an hour and a half, he repeated points he had already made earlier in the evening, as if he did not remember already making them. At one point, he veered so off script, he attacked a supporter for being overweight.
That guy's got a serious weight problem. Go home, start exercising. Get him out of here, please. Got a bigger problem than I do. Got a bigger problem than all of us. Now he goes home and his mom says, what the hell have you just done?
That is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. From the Washington Post, White House Bureau Chief Phil Rucker. With us at the table, Axios political reporter Alexei McCammond, Republican strategist and former communications director for the RNC, Tim Miller. Plus, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance is back, and the Rev Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC and president of the National Action Network. Phil Rucker, let me start with you. What about last night?
Well, Nicole, it was a return to the campaign trail for President Trump. It was indeed a rambling speech. It went on for more than an hour, and he veered across so many topics. But I found most interesting what he had to say about the economy, which was basically, you've got to vote for me because the economy is strong right now. But privately, our reporting has been that he's quite alarmed and rattled about some of these negative indicators that we've seen this week and over the past couple of weeks, as well as what's happening abroad with some of these foreign countries, foreign economies. And Trump is calling out to CEOs, to friends, to some of his real estate buddies, trying to take their temperature, and also voicing skepticism about some of the data that he's seeing, saying some of these statistics are not to be believed because they're cooked up by economists who have an anti-Trump bias. So we'll see how this plays out, but it's not a particularly good sign, I think, for some of his advisors.
Okay, because it's Donald Trump, Phil Rucker, let's go high, now low. He attacked a man who turned out to be one of his own supporters. I don't know that there are many schools in America where you could bully somebody like that and not get suspended.
Yeah, that's probably calls for a timeout in a lot of preschools in America. But, you know, the White House officials this morning were saying that President Trump actually called that supporter from aboard Air Force One last night on his way back here to New Jersey. He did not apologize, according to the White House. He's not somebody who really ever apologizes, but he did convey to this supporter that he didn't mean to offend him and that he thanks him for his support.
All right, Joyce, let's go there because the New York Times did. I read this in the open, but I'll read it again. The speech, as Phil Rucker said, typically rambling, veering on and off script, seemingly at random, over an hour and a half. He repeated points he had already made earlier in the evening as if he did not remember already making them. And I've been on jury duty, so let me enter that into evidence alongside a couple of other things. David Brooks reported in 2000. 17 that a bunch of Republicans came out of a meeting where Donald Trump displayed some signs that were similar to the early stages of Alzheimer's. You've got reporting, I think, from Phil's newspaper, from Axios and other places, that in and out of the room, people either disparagingly or affectionately are saying at an increased clip, he's crazy.
You know, there's pervasive reporting in this regard. And if it was Grandpa, you would probably take him to see a neurologist or someone who specialized in geriatric medicine. That hasn't happened here.
That we know of
is right. But the remedy is the 25th Amendment. And that requires an intact cabinet, which Trump does not have, whether by design or by accident. Most of the cabinet is acting, we don't know what the mix would look like in a vote, and there's no will to take that on in any event.
So there's no will to fill a cabinet with the kind of appointees that would have that power. I would posit that there's not a lot of will to have this conversation, but when it shows up in black and white in the hard copy print of the New York Times, it's impossible for me to ignore it. I mean, you've now got the White House beat reporters, including in their stories about the rally, that the man repeated himself as though he didn't know he'd already made those points.
When you look at the fact that Grandpa is not sitting home reading the paper, but he's on the front page of the paper, and that Grandpa is the football with the nuclear bombs mechanisms near him, this is frightening. You're talking about a man yesterday that at one point in the speech was attacking Hillary Clinton, which was 2.5 years ago, kept repeating himself, attacks an overweight supporter of his that he didn't know was there supporting him. And we've been hearing over and over again that he's losing it. And I think what is driving this even more, Nicole, is that with the economy appearing to be headed at least downward, if not a recession, what you have in England and other problems in Europe, it drives him even further into whatever cloudy area he is mentally, and he's becoming desperate because the race card that he used the last couple of weeks is not working, because you can't tell farmers that are sitting there with soybeans and others in your base that you cause these trade wars and rumors. You can't tell them they got it or it's their fault, but so long before they start saying, but you told me you would improve my lot, and it's not improved. Where's the infrastructure bill? Where are the things he promised his own supporters? Forget about us. He told us that he wasn't going to do anything in terms of those of us that believe in things. But the infrastructure bill, the farmers, the coal miners, he promised all of that, and he can't blame that on blacks and Mexicans because we don't have any of those jobs.
But I think part of the reason we're not hearing about infrastructure or an economic plan for a potential recession, and we're hearing about Hillary Clinton, an overweight man in the crowd, Elizabeth Warren, who he called Pocahontas, is because it's so much easier for someone like Donald Trump to run against an enemy of any sort that he can identify and sort of make a caricature of themselves and drag them through the mud than it is for him to run against himself, which is on a lack of a plan on health care, on infrastructure, on Social Security, a lack of a plan to deal with an economic recession. So instead of getting up there and touting what he claims is a booming national economy, he can't do that. He can't run against himself or on all of his accomplishments. So instead, he targets anyone he can to make an opponent, to turn his base against that person.
Phil Rucker talked about his own skepticism, the president's skepticism about economic data. Let me read you something that Catherine Rampo of the Washington Post writes on the topic of fake stats. When Obama was president, the official economic statistics were good. Trump said they were fake. When Trump became president and inherited the exact same stats, suddenly they were real. Now that they're turning south, they're fake again. My question for you is he putting too much faith in what he's already programmed his voters to do, which is to not believe their eyes and not believe their ears, to only believe him? Or will the numbers not lie if people, as the Rev says, start to feel it?
He has no other option but to do that.
To lie.
To lie, to gaslight and to lie, and to tell his voters not to listen to the experts, to tell his advisors not to listen to the experts. This has been in his mind, the way that he became president in the first place. You know, all the experts told him not to run. All the experts said he wasn't going to win, right? And so here he is. Now he's in the White House, and these same nerds, or weenies, whatever he called them, I think he called them weenies, are seriously, these same weenies are telling him that the economy's going bad.
Weenie, I won't take that personally. He's a former staffer.
Yeah, well, same. So, you know, look, I think that what he is going to do to go forward all the way up until November of next year is say you can either believe me or you're lying eyes, and he's going to say that the economy is great no matter what happens, no matter how bad it gets.
Phil Rucker, your reporting on the president's angst about the economy today is so interesting, and I just have heard anecdotally that the president's calculation on 2020 is that he's in decent shape if and only if the economy holds up. Is there any indication that, and I'm not sure how he turns any harder into, and you and your colleagues have a great piece this week about paper straws and other cultural issues, but that seemed, the three legs of his stool are sort of one, the magic he feels he creates in the room, two, the cultural issues that y'all wrote about this week, plastic straws, attacking NFL players, the wedge issues, the attacks on the squad, and then the third, which you report on today, the economy holding up. Is there any inkling or any talk of anything else being out there for this president to cling to?
That's about it right now, Nicole. I mean, the one hope that Trump has is that he could have a huge foreign policy breakthrough potentially between now and the election. He's obviously
that's scary.
Has his eyes on North Korea, wants that sort of a deal with Kim Jong-un, and if, you know, potentially if there's some breakthrough that we can't imagine happening today, if that were to occur, that could change the dynamic. Similarly, if there were some sort of war or national security threat to the homeland that he was responding to, that could change the political calculus. But right now, the Trump advisors are thinking about the economy, they're thinking about these cultural issues, and that's really the only cards that they have to play. And it's pretty dangerous and risky because unlike in 2012, when Barack Obama was running for re-election in a down economy, Obama had so much sort of popular goodwill among the American people. People wanted him to succeed, that it helped prevent Mitt Romney from winning that election. But that sort of goodwill does not exist, at least according to the polling that we see with Donald Trump.
Okay, so Phil just perfectly framed my next question for all of you. All he's got is stoking racial animus in this country, spinning or lying, as you said, about the strength of the economy, which is still good, but not as good as he says it is. And we've got these flashing yellow lights on the foreign policy front as well. If you look at the polls that we put up at the beginning from Fox News, no less, every single, I think if you go down farther than the top four, he's still in a very, very, very tight race. I guess my question, the predictions I'm looking for are, is he scarier when he feels like he escaped a bad fate, like being exonerated from Mueller, or is he scarier when he's politically weak and desperate?
You know, I think he's plenty scary right now, and Democrats should not look at those polls and breathe any kind of a sigh of relief, because there are structural issues built into the election. There's gerrymandering, there's voter suppression, and unless Democrats stay on that down until November of 2020, Trump could pull this off. He'll be dangerous like a wounded animal.
Wow.
And there is no boundaries to what he will do.
Right.
Because you're talking about a man that is not only looking to stay in the White House, he's also looking to stay out of jail, or at least the courthouse. So he's going to swing with everything he has. And I think that for the Democrats to in any way relax, thinking we've got this in the bag or that we should not come with the best candidate, would play right into his hands. But he's going to have a hard time, even with a breakthrough with a foreign situation, to convince people that he did what he said. He didn't promise those farmers or the people in Appalachia or the people in Pennsylvania that I'm going to bring Kim Jong-un to the table. That's not what he promised them. But if the Democrats can articulate that and drive that message home, he'll get away with it. A lot of it is going to be, do the Democrats understand what they need to do? Because if anybody can beat themselves, the Democrats have shown they can do that.
Republicans did a pretty good job beating themselves when they ran against Donald Trump, in fairness. And you worked for Jeb Bush. Just about everything he predicted about Donald Trump came through. The chaos president, you know, that he's a liar, that he debased the office. I watched some old footage of Jeb that Brian Williams played this week, and everything he warned about has come to pass. What's your advice to Democrats as these polls look promising, but I agree with both Joyce and the Rev about the dynamics?
Look, I think that what the Democrats need to do is just zero in on the economy, on the economic attacks on him, on the way that he's left people behind. Like you said, Rev, I think we get caught up in all these scandals of the day, and they should talk about them. I'm not saying that they should hide from them, but they need to focus on the people that Donald Trump has left behind, the promises that he made to them. His whole campaign is promises kept, promises kept. He hasn't kept any of his promises. The main three promises of his campaign were Mexico is going to pay for the wall, Hillary is going to be in jail, and he was going to drain the swamp.
And that he was even going to build a wall.
Right. That's it. Those are the three things.
Slats.
He hasn't followed up on any of those. The manufacturing base of this country hasn't come back. So I think Alexi said it earlier. What is his card? His card is going to be to divide and attack and be as nasty and divisive as possible, coming from all angles, coming from the right and the left against the Democrats. And the only way to defeat him is going to be to go right back at him.
So I've got two questions for you, but just first pick up on, I mean, just from all that you see in your focus groups, this message about the economy that I hear increasingly from Democrats on the campaign trail, from smart Democrats around this table, that does represent both an opportunity for Democrats and a vulnerability for Trump, even with the swing voters you talk to, right?
That's exactly right, because these swing voters, whether it's in Pennsylvania or Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, they can so easily, and these are folks who voted for Obama twice and then switched to Donald Trump, they can so easily regurgitate these national headlines about the economy's doing so well, black unemployment rates are so low, but then we flip it on them and we say, well, are you feeling that personally? Do you see that in your wages, in your paychecks, in your 2 to 3 jobs that you're stringing together so you can afford childcare? And they say no. And I think that is an opportunity for Democrats to say, look, you might think that the national economy is moving in the right direction, no matter what Trump is trying to do with tariffs. But if it's not reflected in your paycheck, you should think about that twice and 3 times when you're going to the, voting box on Election Day, November 2020. And I think that is just what's really fascinating when we're hearing these economic stats from Donald Trump. People's wages are not going up. Right. And it's heartbreaking to hear from people who say, I make $18 an hour, and that's only so that I can get government assistance to pay for my child care, because otherwise I couldn't get child care for my kids. Donald Trump's not talking about that. He's not talking to those folks.
And it's such a good point in terms of the time he's had to speak to their concerns. I spent a lot of time with these 2-time Obama voters who voted for Trump in Erie, PA, and Bay City, Michigan. And in the first 6 months, their jobs hadn't come back, of course, but they were willing to give him time. And I guess what you're seeing is that there's this open question now about whether he's had enough time. I want to put one more thing to you from this Fox News poll. Voters who have a negative view of both Biden and Trump backed Biden by a 43 to 10% margin in the head-to-head matchup. So they don't like either. Yeah. And we heard a lot of this in 2016. They didn't like their choices. In the Biden-Trump case, 43 to 10% favor Biden. Many would vote for somebody else or wouldn't vote for somebody else. Some are undecided. So that's another, I think, flashing yellow in these polls.
Especially after the 2016 election, in which folks who didn't folks who didn't like both Hillary and Trump, he won them by 17 percentage points nationally, I think, and in those crucial battleground states that really afforded him his electoral college victory. I mean, that is definitely something he should be worried about. And there's something else in that poll that Aaron Blake at the Washington Post wrote about his base support and the margin of error between that and the folks who actually support him, right? The people who approve of his job is higher than the vote share that he's getting. It might be 4 to 5 percentage points, but that is still something he has to think about when he's claiming and playing to this base of supporters who are mostly white, who might approve of the job he's doing, but who aren't totally sold on voting for him again after they took a chance on him in 2016.
And also, I think people forget his populist rhetoric that he's fallen back on because he's been president. You forget that he said this, but he said he was going to go after the prescription drug companies and the banks and the top tax. He hasn't done any of that. And so I think that a lot of those voters who flipped to Obama for him, those are issues that resonate that kind of get lost in the daily
scandal.
And
now those are socialist issues, according to Trump and Republicans.
But you have to remember, when we talk about Obama had a bad economy in 12 and moved forward, he had inherited a bad economy. Yeah. And people were saying, well, he had to fix it. This man inherited a good economy.
No, that's fair.
And has not delivered. Right. So he's like a dentist giving you Novocaine, but when the Novocaine wears out, you got a big political toothache, and people are hurting. The Novocaine is wearing off, and you can't get another shot in my jaw, Mr. Trump. Where's my job?
Phil Rucker, I want to give you the last word, and I want to get your insights and your reporting and your analysis on how Trump reads these polls. We all know how he reads coverage that's true, that people close to him are sourced on, calls it fake news, and the truer, the louder the squeal from the Oval Office. What's your read on any of the polls? Kellyanne Conway is a pollster. Obviously, she can tell a good poll from a bad poll. Are the Fox News polls being dismissed as fake news?
Well, publicly, Nicole, it's a pretty simple way to think about it. If the poll shows Trump winning, it's a real poll, a good poll, a factual poll. If it shows him losing, it's a totally fake, disgusting, biased, rigged poll. But look, the people in the White House, Kellyanne Conway especially, but others as well, and on the campaign know how to read polls. They know that this data is not great for the president, but they think they still have a chance, in part because they view the Democratic field as somewhat weak. But just one point on this conversation we were just having, I kept thinking about a phrase Trump used in the campaign, and it was, "I alone can fix it." And it seems like the real danger for him is that a majority of Americans conclude that he couldn't fix it, that him sort of pitching himself as this genius who could fix everything that ailed our society and our country and our economy, that he's more of a fraud. And that's what a lot of Democratic voters have already concluded, obviously. The question is whether enough of his supporters do.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.